So in this one, we're going to get simple inputs from the user so that we could interact with the user. And this is a really important thing, the interaction with the user. Our application would be meaningless without some interactions. So for now, we're going to simplify this as much as possible to get the input, and later on when we come back, we'll make it a bit more interesting, we'll make it a bit more complex as we go forward. So for now, let's get started. What we're going to utilize is something called scanner. So we're not going to talk in details about it yet, but we're just going to utilize it. To be able to utilize it, we're going to say scanner, press enter. This is going to be the type. You'll notice two things happening here. As soon as you pressed enter, it should have automatically, your IDE should have automatically written this line, which is the import Java util scanner. If it didn't, you'll need to write this manually. Again, we're not going to go in details about it, but to be able to use the scanner, we need this line. And we'll come back to it when we learn a bit more what all of this is. So this is our type, like any other variable. We're going to give it a name. So let's say our scanner. And then we have to initialize it. So we're going to say equal. But when we initialize it, we have to say where the scanner is getting the input. Again, we're going to copy this. We're not going to go in details about why we need to do this. We'll come back to it when we learn more about objects. So we're just going to write new scanner, right? And inside the parentheses here, we're going to write system.in. So this system.in is where it's going to get its input. And this input is going to be our console. So that's where the system.in is. We'll talk about different places where you could get input from, maybe in a bit in the future videos, such as, let's say, from a file, such as from the internet, from a database, or from whatever, maybe even a virtual reality. We'll get there as we progress. But for now, our only output and input will be that console we've been utilizing so on. So we're going to get the scanner. We're going to get the input from system in. Now we need to be able to get, it didn't run the correct thing. We need to be able to get input from the user. Doing this line is not enough. This is the setup. So let's write here, setup. But for us to get those input from the user, we need to create, well, we gotta call this scanner that we created, dot, and we gotta say what we want. Now this is gonna be dependent on the type that you want to retrieve from the console. So from the user, what do you want to retrieve? Do you want to retrieve a string? Do you want to retrieve an integer, etc.? To do that, you're gonna put this keyword next, and here's what's interesting. On this keyword next, you're gonna see there's a lot of things being shown to you by the IDE, the IntelliSense. nextLine, next big decimal. Here we go. So nextLine, next big decimal, next big integer, next big integer, next boolean, blah blah blah. Which one do we need is going to be dependent on what's being written on the right side. This part is saying what it's going to retrieve for you. So you can see here the first one, next, is going to give you back a string. And again, we're going to go in more details in a future video, but for now, to be just able to utilize this, look for the next with the corresponding type that you want to retrieve at the end. Do we want to retrieve an integer, or do we want to retrieve a double, a float, a byte, so on, a boolean? Okay, this is going to be important because getting input could cause a lot of error. So just make sure that you retrieve the correct thing. So we're going to start with this next, and I'm going to point out a few of them that are important for us to start with, and we'll come back in the future to learn a bit more about the scanner and how it works and so forth. To be honest, you'll learn about it before we even get to scanner. That's how programming works. You learn stuff as you know more about it, right? Anyway, so let's get started. So the scanner, we write next here. This allows us to retrieve a word. So it's a bit special. So even though it's giving back a string, it's giving back a word string. this is important to understand what a word is. I'm going to get into it in a second. Now, if I press run, you'll notice rather than saying process finish in my application is currently stuck. Normally, we would get this process finish at the end of it. But now my application is stuck waiting for the user to get his input. We get the user's input by the user pressing enter. If he does not press enter, well, we don't know when the user finished his input. So you could see that input coming in as green. This is me typing in. And the moment he presses enter, that's the moment our application ends. So the application is hanging on this line 9 before it could go to line 10. Remember, our application goes top to bottom, one line of code at a time, and it cannot do anything unless one of them is finished. So what we're going to do is put a system.out at the end, and we're going to just say the end. Right? Let's run this one more time. So here I'm going to start typing. Notice until I press enter, nothing is going to happen. The moment I press enter, the end gets printed. That's because we were stuck on line 9. And then we got to line 10. And then the process finished, right? We're at the end of our application. Great. Now we got this word, but it's useless for us if we don't store it somewhere. Remember that the computer cannot understand if you need to hold on to something or not. The computer's memory is really important. It has to share it with millions of applications, so you have to be explicit when you want something done the way you want it. So if you want to retain some value, we need to hold on to that value into a variable. So here we wanted a word, so we could say string. Let's say word equals scanner.next. Run it again. Just every time I'm going to run it just to make sure we have no errors. Still working fine. Press enter, we get to the end. The problem now is we put it in the word, but we're not utilizing the word. So this variable we created, it's just holding on to stuff until the application finishes and then it gets junked. So let's put some space here. So we say system.out, the word is, and we could, let's say we put a colon space, and here, actually we didn't do concatenation yet. We're just gonna do here system.out println, and we're gonna put in the variable word. So we're printing the word that just came in. So again, let's run it again. So here I'm gonna type first, second, last, and I'm gonna press enter. Which word do you think is gonna come in? And you'll notice that it's only capturing the first word. So this is another problem that could happen, is we're capturing a word and not a line. So this is an important aspect of this. We're capturing the first word. If we do this again, let's say string, and let's say word 2 as a variable, scanner.next system, and let's say we're going to copy these two things, and we're going to say word 2, right? Now you'll notice something interesting. Let's do it again. We're going to write first, second, and last. Press enter. You'll notice that this time, even though we have a scanner next, it didn't wait for the user to input any values. This is because all of this text is inside of a buffer that the scanner is holding on to. It's actually inside the buffer of the system.in. Okay? So this buffer meaning it's like it's memory, it's holding on to these things until it's being utilized. So the problem with that is, sorry, my cat's here. So the problem with these words being utilized is it's not going to clear anything until we either explicitly clear it or we take it out of from the buffer by doing these next calls. So you got to be careful if you ever do next that the user hasn't written more than it should inside that statement, inside that input. So one thing we could do to fix this is, rather than getting just a word, we could also get a line. And we could do that by nextLine. So nextLine is still returning you a string, but this time the string is going to take the whole buffer until the new line is captured. So until the user pressed enter. So we're going to system.out print. We're going to say the line is, or the line, system.out line. Notice one last thing while we're doing these outputs, I put a little space at the end of all of them. This is so the input doesn't kind of have no space in between. It's clean. It's to be nice and easy access to the user. So again, we're going to do first, second, last, and press enter. You'll notice again, no inputs was added, but it captured first, second, and last already because the buffer was full. Let's go ahead and make this a bit longer. So first, second, third, fourth, and last, and press enter. You'll notice that the first word, the second word is captured with this next, but everything else inside the line is captured with nextLine. So all the rest remaining buffer is captured here, right? So this is an important thing. Now the other thing that we need to tackle is when we press play, when we press run, the user doesn't know that he has to input stuff. Remember that the user doesn't see code. The user just sees the interface you give it to him. The user doesn't know how code works. We're building it for your dad and grandfather. They never coded in their life. They don't really care for that. They paid for a service. They need to know what's going on. So we need to give feedback at every opportunity. Make it clear for them. So right here before line 9, we have to specify to them what we're trying to do. So I'm going to do a print, a normal print. I'm going to say, please enter a sentence of more than 3 words. Why do I say 3 words or more? Well, because, oops, I deleted the quotes. That's because I take one word, I take a second word, and I take all the remaining. So if I have less than 3 words at this line, we'll be expecting input again from the buffer, but the user wouldn't know about that. So let's try and see what I mean. So first thing first, I run it. Sorry, my cat's attacking my fingers. So first thing first, I run it. Now we see a good output to the user. Please enter a sentence of more than 3 words. We're like, okay, I got some feedback as the user. I say first, second. Sorry, my cat attacking me now. I'm just going to put some gibberish here so one of my hands could be used as fluff for my cat. And I press enter. We got the first word, we got the second one, and we got all the remaining stuff. Again, it's a bit more legible because we give feedback to the user saying, hey, please enter some sentence. Sorry, let me just move my cat. All right. She's going to come back. She knows how to climb. But let's get to what would happen if we do less than 3 words. So let's say I say first, second, and I press enter. Notice here, we got lucky in this case because the line utilized whatever was left in the buffer, which was the enter key. Let's try again. Maybe it changed a little bit, or maybe my notion is a bit wrong. I'm just going to press first, and I'm going to press enter. Notice it got the first word, but then it's stuck waiting for us to type in the second word. Let's say second, press enter. Notice it got the second, but the next line, okay, so the next line is a bit different. The next line, because the scanner is not clear in the buffer, it just goes onto the next line. And this is most likely because we put a enter in there. Or I'll have to read the description here, okay? But we'll come back to the scanner in the future. Again, I'm sorry, my Java is not the best, but it's good enough for what we need. Okay, so we got to be a bit careful with this. So maybe we could fix the scanner. Let's see. Again, I don't want to go too deep inside the scanner, but we could do, let's say, Oh, I saw a reset. Let's see. This is probably what I want. Yeah, let's try. I think it's clear. No. So let's go. Sorry, my cat's back. All right. Sorry. There we go. Okay, so let's just do a quick reset. I just want to make sure that the scanner is going to get input. If it's not that, we could look into it. No, the scanner has another problem. We'll come back to that a bit later. Sorry, my cat is becoming really a pain. All right, so got the cat out of the way. Anyway, for the next line, we could ignore it for now. This is, again, I'm pretty sure this is because it's going to the carriage return, the new line that we're looking for. So over here, the next is not really looking to clear that. The next is just looking for either a space, a carriage return, or a tab, or something like that. Anyway, not to go into details too much for now. We're just going to remove this reset. We don't really care. What I would suggest as a standard for our current level is to keep it with nextLine. Just ignore next. We want to make sure that the buffer is kind of cleaned out every time the user enters something. Now, later on, we could clean up what the user says inside that variable. But for now, we're going to assume, and we need to do this for at least the beginning level, we're going to assume the user is always going to enter correctly all the data that needs to be entered. Okay? So, try to use nextLine over next. These are for words. But we could also do this for anything else. So, let's say cout. Let's say, what is your age? See, again, I'm expecting a number. He could enter something else and it could break my input. But we're going to assume for now that he's always going to enter the correct thing. So we're going to say scanner.next, and then this time I want a whole number, nextInt. And we could say you are, again, we didn't do concatenation yet. We're going to just leave it at that. You are system.out, age, system.out, a little space, years old. Again, notice how I did these three lines. They're a bit interesting. You might mix them together. Later on, we'll learn about concatenation. We'll learn about different ways to concatenate. But for now, you'll notice that this is a pretty interesting thing to do. Let's try this out. So, again, words could be anything. We get all our words. The last one, the scanner next line, will clean out our buffer. What is your age? Again, if I put a string, this is going to break, right? We're going to assume, we're not going to learn what this is. We're going to assume right now that the user that's utilizing our app is always going to enter a integer. So 23. And you could see here, it cleanly printed, you are 23 years old. Okay? So this is the scanner nextInt. And we have another couple of these. We have the float. This is good, let's say, for money. Scanner, again, nextFloat. Mind you, you could also do a next double, right? Double the size, so more precision. It's up to you. I would suggest we stick to float or double, whichever you prefer. Double might be easier because you don't have to put the little F at the end of the numbers. So a few that are interesting for us, we have int, we have float, we have boolean, I don't know, yes, no, scanner, next boolean, right? And so for so on. So for every type that we had so far, we're going to get one of these scanner functions, where we're going to talk about this a bit further, that will get the input from the buffer. Mind you, if they enter weird stuff, it's going to break. But for now, we're not going to care about it because we're not at that level yet. But the scanner is going to help us get some inputs, and which will allow us to do a lot more interesting topics which we haven't reached. See you guys in the next video.